gravel crunched under the tires of the family station wagon, a sound that felt too loud for the suffocating silence of Blackwood Glen. Ilara pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the ancient pines blur into a wall of jagged needles. Her parents called this a fresh start, a way to escape the city's noise. But to Ilara, it felt like being buried alive in a town that didn't appear on any GPS maps made after 1994. The air here was different, thick and stagnant, like the breath of someone who had been sleeping for a very long time. Her first morning at Blackwood High was draped in a persistent, low-hanging fog that swallowed the tops of the goalposts on the football field. The school was a monolithic brick structure overgrown with ivy that looked more like grasping veins than plants. As she stepped through the heavy oak doors, the interior didn't hum with the usual energy of 1,000 teenagers. It echoed with a synchronized rhythmic gait. Students moved with their eyes fixed straight ahead, their expressions as vacant as unwritten pages. No one laughed. No one slammed a locker. No one even seemed to breathe. Ilara found her locker, number 404, at the end of a dimly lit corridor where the air smelled faintly of formaldehyde and old copper. When she swung the heavy iron door open, it didn't creak. It groaned. Taped to the back of the door was a thick, cream-colored envelope with her name written in calligraphy so sharp it looked like it had been carved with a razor. Inside was a single card. The Blackwood High Student Code. The third bell. There are 3 bells between classes. The first is for the students. The second is for the teachers. If you hear a third bell that sounds like a flat metallic tolling, do not leave your classroom. Lock the door and turn off the lights. Whatever knocks and sounds like the principal is merely checking the structural integrity of the wood. Do not answer. The hall monitor. You will encounter a student wearing a neon yellow vest with no face. This is the monitor. If he holds up a red paddle, stop immediately and hold your breath until he passes. If he holds up a green paddle, you must run to the nearest bathroom and flush every toilet. He is thirsty, and the pipes are the only thing that distracts him. The cafeteria offering. On Wednesdays, the special is always meatloaf. Do not eat it. Bring a small piece of raw fruit and leave it on the edge of the table. If it is gone when you return from getting a drink, you have been granted safe passage for the afternoon. If the fruit has turned into a pile of gray ash, go to the nurse and tell her you have the pail. She will hide you in the cellar. The library whispers. The school library has no books printed after the year the town was founded. If you hear a whispering coming from the restricted section that sounds like your mother's voice, do not follow it. Your mother is at home. The library needs a new librarian, and it prefers those who recognize familiar voices. The bathroom mirror. Never look into the mirrors in the girls' locker room if you are alone. If you accidentally catch your reflection and it is wearing a different colored shirt than you are, do not blink. Back out of the room slowly. The other you is trying to synchronize. If she succeeds, she will walk out into the hallway and you will stay in the glass. The 3 p.m. exit. The school day ends at 2:50 p.m. You must be off the school grounds by 3 p.m. sharp. If the sun begins to set and you are still in the building, the hallways will begin to stretch. Do not try to find the exit. Go to the boiler room and wait for the janitor. He's the only one who knows the way out of the below, but he will ask for a memory in exchange. Give him a sad one. He hates the taste of joy. Alara felt a cold drop of sweat slide down her neck. She looked up from the card, expecting a group of seniors to jump out and laugh at the new girl falling for a prank. But the hallway was empty, save for a tall figure at the far end wearing a neon yellow vest. The figure had no eyes, no nose, just a smooth expanse of pale skin. Slowly, the monitor raised a red paddle. Ilara's lungs seized. Remembering Rule 2, she squeezed her eyes shut and held her breath. The silence of the hallway became deafening, replaced by the sound of wet, heavy footsteps. It wasn't the sound of shoes on linoleum, but the rhythmic slap-squelch of bare, damp feet. The air around her turned freezing, smelling of stagnant pond water and old, wet leather. The footsteps stopped directly in front of her. Ilara could feel the presence, a cold, towering void that seemed to suck the warmth out of her skin. A hand, clammy and lacking the friction of fingerprints, brushed her shoulder. It lingered there for a second, the pressure increasing as if the thing were trying to gauge her density before sliding away. The slap squelch continued down the hall until it vanished into the distance. When she opened her eyes, the hallway was empty, but her locker door was vibrating as if something were screaming on the other side of the metal. By her second period, history, the sky outside the narrow, barred windows had turned the color of a fresh bruise. The teacher, a man whose skin looked like draped velvet over bone, didn't use a textbook. He simply recited names and dates of people who had disappeared in the glen. Suddenly, the first bell rang. A sharp, electric chirp. The students remained motionless. The second bell rang. A deeper, resonant chime. The teacher stopped mid-sentence, his chalk hovering over the board. Then came the third. It wasn't a bell at all. It was a flat, metallic tolling that seemed to vibrate in Ilara's very teeth. It was the sound of an iron hammer hitting an anvil made of bone. Instinct took over. Ilara lunged for the classroom door, slamming the heavy deadbolt home and flicking the light switch. The room plunged into a thick, unnatural shadow. The other students didn't move. They sat like statues in the dark, their breathing so shallow it was non-existent. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was rhythmic and polite. "Ilara? It's Principal Miller," a voice said through the wood. It sounded perfect, warm, authoritative, and kind. "There's a small issue with your registration. Could you step into the hall for a moment? We just need to verify your origins." Ilara huddled under the teacher's desk, her hands over her mouth. The knocking grew harder. The wood began to groan and splinter, but not inward. It looked as though something were trying to melt through the grain. "I can smell the city on you, Ilara," the voice whispered, dropping an octave into something that sounded like grinding stones. "It smells like exhaust and hope. We don't like hope in Blackwood." The knocking continued for 10 minutes. Long, agonizing minutes where the door handle turned and twisted with impossible strength. Then, the third bell tolled again, and the hallway fell silent. When the lights flickered back on, the teacher continued his lecture as if the interruption hadn't happened, though Ilara noticed his chalk was now red. Wednesday arrived with a cloying, heavy scent that permeated the entire building. It smelled of burnt iron and sugar. In the cafeteria, the students moved in a slow-motion trance toward the serving line. Ilara stood in line, her heart hammering. The special was a slab of meatloaf that sat on a bed of gray mash. It wasn't steaming, it was vibrating. Small, rhythmic tremors moved through the meat, and Ilara could swear she saw a single, unblinking eye briefly surface in the gravy before sinking back down. She remembered Rule 3. She sat at a corner table, her tray untouched. From her bag, she pulled a small, bruised Macintosh apple. She placed it on the very edge of the plastic table and stared at her lap. Across from her sat a boy named Toby. He was a junior, one of the few who had looked her in the eye on Monday. His hands were shaking. "I'm so hungry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I forgot my lunch. I have to eat." "Toby, don't!" Ilara hissed. But Toby was gone. He took a massive bite of the meatloaf. Instantly, the color drained from his face, replaced by a translucent, waxy gray. His veins turned black, tracing a web across his neck. He stood up, his movements jerky, and walked toward the nurse's office. He didn't look at Ilara. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked with the stiff gait of a marionette. Ilara looked at the edge of her table. The apple was gone. In its place was a small pile of white salt. She felt a sudden cooling sensation in her chest, as if a weight had been lifted. She had been granted safe passage for the afternoon. The library of Blackwood High was a labyrinth of towering mahogany shelves that seemed to reach into an infinite darkness. There were no computers, no plastic chairs, just the smell of rotting paper and the flickering light of green-shaded lamps. Ilara was searching for a way out, a map, a bus schedule, anything that didn't lead deeper into the pines. She wandered into the restricted section, where the books were bound in a leather that felt disturbingly like human skin. "Ilara! Honey, are you in here?" The voice was perfect. It was her mother. It had the exact cadence of the way she called Ilara for dinner. "We're leaving, sweetie. I found the car keys. We're going back to the city. Just come behind the shelf, okay? I'm right here." Ilara's heart soared. For a split second, she forgot the rules. She took a step toward the darkness between the shelves. But then she remembered. Her mother was at home, unpacking boxes. Her mother didn't know Ilara was in the library. She stopped. "You're not my mother," she whispered. The whispering changed. It became a chorus of voices. Her father, her old best friend, her third-grade teacher, all of them begging her to step into the restricted section. "The library needs a new librarian, Ilara," they chanted in unison. "Your voice is so clear. It would sound beautiful in the stacks." Ilara began to hum. She hummed a loud, obnoxious pop song she'd hated over the summer. She hummed until her throat hurt, drowning out the honeyed invitations. The shelves began to rattle, books falling to the floor and flapping their covers like dying birds. She backed out of the library, never taking her eyes off the dark gap between the shelves until she hit the hallway. The final period was gym. Ilara was exhausted, her nerves frayed to the point of snapping. She went to the girls' locker room to change, forgetting in her fatigue that she was the only one in there. She caught her reflection in the long, silvered mirror by the showers. She froze. The other her in the mirror was wearing a bright red sweater. Ilara was wearing her school-mandated gray hoodie. The reflection was standing perfectly still, its hands at its sides, while Alara was mid-stride. Rule 5. Do not blink. Alara stared at the reflection. The other. Her began to move, but it wasn't mimicking Alara. It began to pull at its own face, stretching the skin until the smile reached the ears. It took a step toward the surface of the glass, the red sweater bright and vivid against the dull gray of the locker room. I like your life, Alara, the reflection whispered. Its voice didn't come from the room. It came from inside Alara's own head. I think I'll take it. You can stay here. It's quiet in the glass. Alara's eyes began to sting. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't blink. She began to back away, her feet sliding over the damp tile. The other her was now pressed against the glass, its palms flat against the surface. The glass began to ripple like water. Alara reached the door, her hand fumbling for the handle. Just as her fingers curled around the metal, she saw the reflection's shirt start to turn gray. It was synchronizing. With a final burst of willpower, Alara threw herself through the door and into the hallway, slamming it shut. She didn't look back to see if the girl in the red sweater was following. She checked her watch. 2:58 p.m. The school felt different now. The hallways were longer, the lockers receding into a perspective that didn't make sense. The exit sign at the end of the hall seemed miles away. She ran, her boots thudding on the linoleum, but the door didn't get any closer. 3:00 p.m. The lights in the hallway didn't turn off, they turned red. The air grew hot and smelled of soot. The walls began to breathe, the ivy from outside punching through the brick and curling along the ceiling. She wasn't in Blackwood High anymore. She was in the below. Remembering the final rule, she stopped trying to run for the exit. She turned and headed for the basement. The stairs were made of rusted iron and groaned under her weight. In the boiler room, the heat was immense. Huge cast-iron furnaces roared with a fire that looked like liquid gold. Standing by the largest boiler was the janitor. He was a man made of shadows and ash, his eyes glowing like embers. He held a massive ring of keys that clinked with the sound of 1,000 bells. "You're late, Alara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The school has already started to digest you." "I need to go home," she panted. "The way out is through the fire," the janitor said, holding out a weathered, soot-stained hand. "But I require a memory, something for the furnace." Alara thought of her 7th birthday, the cake her mom had made, the way the sun felt on her face. No. Rule 6. He hates the taste of joy. She dug deep into her mind. She thought of the day they had to put her dog down. She remembered the cold rain, the weight of the leash in her hand, and the hollow, empty feeling in her chest as they drove away from the vet. She focused on that sadness, that pure, unadulterated grief, and pushed it into her hand. She placed her hand in the janitor's. The shadow man closed his eyes, a shiver running through his ashen frame. "Delicious," he whispered. "So bitter, so cold." He stepped aside and unlocked a small wooden door behind the boiler. "Run, Alara, and don't look back. If you look back, the memory stays, and you stay with it." Alara bolted through the door. She didn't look back at the shadow man or the screaming furnaces. She ran through a tunnel of darkness until she burst through the front doors of the school. The sun was hitting the horizon, casting the school in a bloody light. Her mother's station wagon was idling in the parking lot. Ilara climbed into the car, her hands shaking so violently she had to sit on them. Her mother smiled, looking at her with those warm, oblivious eyes. "How was your first few days, sweetie? You look a bit pale." Ilara reached into her pocket. She felt a small, hard object. She pulled it out. It was a brass key with the number 404 engraved on it. "It was fine," Ilara whispered. But as she looked in the rearview mirror, she realized she couldn't remember her dog's name. She couldn't remember what he looked like or the sound of his bark. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, ringing silence. She looked back at the school as they drove away. Standing in the window of the locker room was a girl in a red sweater, waving a stiff, rhythmic goodbye. Ilara didn't wave back. She just watched the pines swallow the school, wondering what memory the janitor would ask for tomorrow.